My strongest conviction belief is that financial independence for agents is a precursor to full agent autonomy. If you give the agent the ability to pay for things online, for agents, it's exponentially higher value because they can interact with services, they can hire humans to do their tasks. For context, our Q4 2025 goal for x402 was 25,000 transactions. And at the end of Q4, we were hitting that every 5 minutes. So the success and excitement that has been surrounding it so far has been completely exceeding my expectations.
We talk about x402 a lot, but can you kind of give your version of what x402 is?
There was one error code that the founders of the internet always wanted to implement, but they never actually did. And Mark Andreessen even calls it the original sin of the internet that it wasn't implemented. And that was error code 402. And it meant payment required. I think it'll really be the overthrowing of the internet from something that humans are interacting with to something that's like agent first and agent native. The original vision was automation at the core and humans at the edges. And I think that's fully possible with agents.
We're not quite sure yet where the agentic economy is going and who are the winners and losers, but we do know the players currently building robust ecosystems within the stack. And one of those players is Coinbase. And that's exactly why we've brought on Lincoln Murr from the Coinbase AI team to talk to us about the Coinbase ecosystem and where they see the opportunity for x402 and the agentic economy to actually play out. So Lincoln, how does a 12-year-old buy Bitcoin randomly on the internet and end up working on AI at Coinbase?
Yeah, great question. So growing up kind of chronically online, I heard about Bitcoin pretty early on. I thought it was interesting, but I had no idea what it was. And at a couple $100, it was still far out of my reach of my allowance money. When I was around 12 on my iPhone 4S, I learned that I needed to get a VPN so I could start torrenting video games and playing them without having to buy them. So it was a very cost-effective decision for me. So I went online to go buy a VPN, and it turns out they accepted something called Bitcoin. Okay, great. Heard of it before. How do I get my hands on this? So I took a Target gift card that I had gotten for my birthday earlier that year and sold it on local Bitcoins to buy that Bitcoin and make this purchase for this VPN. So that was like my first experience ever really interacting with money online. And it worked, and I didn't have any complaints about it. I never really thought about it. A couple of years later, I checked that wallet again, and it gone back from like $20 to $10, and it was at $20. And I was like, that's weird. I thought I had spent that money already. And I didn't realize what was happening behind the scenes. But picked up crypto again when I was around 15 or 16 and had like a high school job. I thought it started throwing some money into it. It went up, came back down, but I was hooked, remained very interested, did whatever I could to stay in the space in terms of reading, researching, started writing articles for various different publications, founding my university's blockchain club, and doing research my senior year with the Ethereum Foundation. All of that kind of wrapped itself into me having a compelling resume to go get a product job at Coinbase. Originally, I was working on some of our wallet APIs and our developer-facing tools. But one night, I was just messing around with Cursor and some agent framework at the time. I think it was a LangChain or OpenAI had some agent framework. And I remember typing into Cursor, let's like give this AI access to a wallet. And it ended up working. And I could start typing stuff like go buy Bitcoin or deploy a token, things today that we take for granted, but at the time was a real holy shit moment. And ended up posting that on Twitter. It went pretty viral. And the rest is sort of the history of Coinbase's AI suite of products. They created a team around this initiative, started with this tool called Agent Kit, which was the productionized version of this like wallet for an agent framework. This was late 2024. Very quickly as well, once this initial crypto AI hype cycle started to burst, we noticed that one of the big problems was that agents never had anything to actually pay for. So it was a very natural extension for us to start working on x402 and building out more of this agentic infrastructure stack to support this full agent economy.
Nice. And we talk about x402 a lot, but can you kind of give your version of what x402 is and how you guys are positioned around that?
Yeah, I view x402 really as just an internet native payments protocol. And I think it gets a lot of credence lent to it because of the name and the history behind it. So when the internet was created decades ago, they created all of these different status codes. You might be familiar with some of them, like 404 means error not found. 200 means success. And sometimes you'll see these, but most of the time they live invisibly behind the scenes. There was one error code that the founders of the internet always wanted to implement, but they never actually did. And Mark Andreessen even calls it the original sin of the internet that it wasn't implemented. And that was error code 402. And it meant payment required. And there have been various different shots attempting to create payments on the internet, from PayPal to Stripe to various other players, but they all are not really internet native in some sense. So we viewed now as the right opportunity to attempt to revitalize this narrative around agent native payments or payments generally on the internet because they can be agent native. And we think stablecoins are the right rail on which for that to happen. But we're also open to the idea that anyone can use whatever payment rail they want. Really, x402 is just a way to standardize how person A can send person B money on the internet in a cheap, fast, efficient manner.
And for you guys in particular, you have this like robust stack at Coinbase, and especially products supporting the AI stack. Can you just go through and share like from the chain all the way up to like some of these SDKs into like the CLI and explain like bit by bit how each piece fits together?
Yeah, totally. So I guess it makes the most sense to come at it from two different sides. You have like the buyer side, which is like the individual or the agent or consumer that has a wallet, and then also the seller side, which is the person or the company or whoever that is that has something that they want to sell on the internet. So to start with the seller, what they're really looking for is the infrastructure that enables them to, as easily and as cheaply as possible, start to accept payments that can be from humans or agents or really whatever. So the path for them and what we support them there with is the infrastructure, billing, and on-chain stack that abstracts away a lot of the difficulty that would typically be there if you wanted to accept on-chain payments. So for example, one of the things that we provide is called the Facilitator, the Coinbase developer platform Facilitator. It's a specific piece of infrastructure within the x402 stack that allows you to accept payments without the user having to pay gas and without you as the seller having to have anything but a crypto wallet. So all of the RPC nodes and browser extension wallets no longer has to be a thing. You could create like a Coinbase for Business account. You could give your single line of code integration into x402 that says, hey, this is the thing that I want to sell. You give that the wallet address, and then we can handle the rest. One of the other things that we provide on the seller side that starts to blend a little bit more into the buyer side is discovery. So one of the big pieces that I'm very excited about is the potential for AIs to discover things autonomously without having to go through these traditional means and mechanisms that are required by a human to set up a boutique relationship with a potential service provider before they're able to pay for that skill. So to make that more concrete, what I mean is, say you type into your AI, hey, I want to turn this PDF into a podcast. If you have some sort of wallet, which we're working on, we have something called Coinbase for Agents for that. It's literally a way for you to sign into your Coinbase account and give an agent access to an isolated portfolio to do trading, payments, everything. Your agent should be able to search across the internet, across all of the available x402 compatible services, and find the one that can most easily and efficiently and has the strongest reputation, turn that PDF into a podcast for you. It should be able to reach out to that service and say, hey, I would like to pay you to complete a service. That service should say, okay, great. It'll cost $1. Here's what I need from you to send me. And then your agent should just be able to sign a message using its wallet and make that transaction happen. And the facilitator and the rest of our infrastructure takes care of the rest. So to state it more plainly, the pieces of the infrastructure stack that we provide are pretty verticalized across the entire thing, but it includes the wallet infrastructure for both the buyer and the seller, the on-chain infrastructure to make that payment actually happen and be published on-chain, the discovery layer through which agents can find other services, and then also, of course, the protocol, which is now being governed in its own separate foundation with the x402 Foundation. So it's out of our hands, but we do get to have, some level of influence or insight into how we can best support agentic payments on the internet, and then trickle that down into our more opinionated infrastructure.
Well said. Yeah, super clear. So for this stack you have, basically you have like your bank account, which is Coinbase, and then you have a couple products that allow you to either give agents access to your account for trading, or some use cases that give access to your account to buy services to do certain things. So within the stack, I think trading is kind of straightforward. You can interact with different protocols on a blockchain, but on the services side where you can use x402 and facilitate payments, where are you seeing the biggest use case of what people are actually doing with these different services? And in the past, we've heard a lot from people saying it's primarily go to market and sales. But curious from your end, what you're saying yourself.
Yeah, I suspect you heard that from the Agent Cash Merit Systems team. It's funny because we're seeing the same thing. Like people enrichment, I think has been an interesting use case that I didn't expect to necessarily be the case, but I would have to corroborate their claim. I think the reason that is the case, though, is because it's an interesting example of what happens when you have more fluid access between various different services. So previously, if I wanted to set up a sort of like person enrichment pipeline, I would have to go to like 5 or 6 different services, sign up for each of those individually, fund each of those accounts with credits using a credit card, and then give my agent those API keys. But now with x402, I can just boom, 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 hit them all in a row and get back unique data that otherwise would have taken me a while to actually go set up. So I think it's really more so that we're seeing this as an early example of how you can compose different services together in unique and streamlined manners. And that's why I've seen GTM be something that's interesting. The other that we're starting to see come to life is around agentic trading. The main one here and the main sort of thesis being, if an agent is trading, if you just tell ChatGPT to go make you money, it's probably not going to do a great job. If you tell ChatGPT to go make you money, but you give it access to Nansen and Artemis and proprietary Substack articles or other pieces of information that aren't necessarily publicly available, maybe it'll perform better than those that are just plainly scraping the internet. So I think we're going to see more people who want to set up these autonomous trading agents start to have this more positive feedback loop in terms of the services that they're paying for to then better inform the decisions that they're making.
Interesting. Yeah. There's the go make money and make no mistakes, right, to ChatGPT. And I think people finally realize that that doesn't work. I want to ask you this, because of these two verticals, right? The finance, which is like trading and being able to like rebalance positions, open longs or sell assets, I think is super useful. We're starting to see like Mercury, you can manage your bank account from CLI, very similar experience. And then Robinhood just opened up agentic trading. So this stuff is like early and we're starting to see it start to really pan out on the trading side, even outside of crypto, which I think is interesting. Again, back on the agent side, why do you think that it's like the go-to-market piece? And because there's so many different use cases, right? Trading is very specific to using stablecoins or using Coinbase. I think the community is there, but it seems almost random that go-to-market sales, this prospecting type of use case has evolved. And I wonder if it has to do with the tools available. Like if people just said, okay, here are the providers, and then the best culmination of a workflow using those specific providers was go to market, or if naturally just like the physics of the product, it just pushes towards like research and like search and retrieval. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, really both points that you made, I think are quite valid. Like, one, obviously we have this core user journey available today to do this go-to-market, person enrichment. And I think that in and of itself lends credence to the concept that it's something that kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that people are already used to this type of form factor and interaction pattern when they're doing go-to-market or person enrichment. A lot of the really popular GTM tools today have something resembling a chat interface or otherwise are moving and trending toward this direction. So it's something where the crypto piece of it acted purely as an accelerant to get more people to try it out very quickly. But then I also think too that part of what we're seeing here is the broad implications and the straightforward nature of doing something like searching someone up and getting all the information you need about them. It falls across various different domains. That can be recruiting. That can be a meeting prep motion. That can be a go-to-market if you are wanting to purely figure out what somebody's interested in. Or there's so many wide applications of that specific use case that I think is indicative of a broader trend and one that we should try to find other areas that are particularly compelling for. But I don't want to over-index on GTM as the thing that agentic commerce is good for. I really think it comes down to being this ability to compose different skills together, do so seamlessly, solving a real pain point for people in terms of not having these tools today or not having access to them, and working across a wide variety of domains that has made it particularly resonant.
And outside of like inference, another use case that we've heard is like paying for inference outside of that, which we can circle back on. But yeah, that like search and retrieval, research. Are there any other newer kind of endpoints or use cases bubbling up? And it could be early, right? But just anything that you're seeing currently.
Yeah. So one that I've been particularly excited about that, to be clear, doesn't have a ton of traction yet, but I think we're moving in this direction, is around this thought piece that Vitalik put out from a couple of years ago. It's called something along the lines of, it has information finance in the title. But anyways, his whole thesis is that he thinks that AI agents will be the primary traders on low liquidity prediction markets because they are uniquely well suited for the task of making money on very small amounts of volume. So say, for example, a sub $1,000 prediction market. It's not worth either of our time to go scrape through dozens of hours of data to try to figure out some sort of anomaly or arbitrage opportunity. But if I can go hand that off to my agent with like 10 cents of reasoning and data retrieval capabilities, then it might actually be able to make money in a more consistent basis because of just fundamental market mispricings it's literally not worth anyone's time to do it. And that information that is sort of, bubbled up in the form of the actual true efficient market odds of a specific market. And then also the ability to, it's basically like market making on a really small scale and in a really primitive manner, but one that I think will become particularly interesting, especially as people are looking to set their agents up to run more autonomously and make money for them. So that's what I'm interested in. Another one that we're starting to see is agents themselves and composing various different workflows together and the value of that. So what I mean there is, imagine instead of you taking 5 or 6 different endpoints and using those to create some sort of enrichment timeline, what if you just handed that task off to an agent to go do the same exact thing for you, but in a more specialized manner? And at first, I totally understand why that feels just like an unnecessary layer of abstraction. But from my view, it's very similar to how our economy evolved in terms of having specialized roles and people for specific things. I'm pretty confident that if I sat down for, 2 to 3 weeks and very specifically tuned a prompt and did the model routing correct and found out all the different tips and tricks about these different services, that I could create a workflow about whether it's stock research or, go-to-market enrichment, whatever that use case might be, that is more efficient than somebody just telling their individual agent to go do it on their own. And they would actually be better off paying me to do that 25 cents for a one-time query than letting their agent flounder around and write code and maybe mess up the calls a few times. So I think there's this like efficiency gap that we're going to find. And that's going to be this agent economy, is agents that are hyper fine-tuned to do specific tasks on behalf of users.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. We brought up this question a lot actually on the agent to agent payments, because that kind of feels where you're headed. And kind of one of the critiques I have is like a lot of A to A use cases are like an agent paying for a service, and it's not actually like the agents interacting. Like there's not like a shared protocol or maybe like negotiation use case. I'm curious, do you see it that way, or do you think this is like a actual A to A?
I think that we could probably long-term get away with just calling it machine-to-machine payments, and the fact that it's one agent paying another agent to do a task is kind of an implementation detail. Like, I don't necessarily think about like B2C. I think B2C is a great example of a term that's really high level. And we could break it down to be like customer to website, user to API, user to storefront, user to merchant. But really, it's just business to consumer. And when you think about it from that high up of a level, a lot of those details just don't really even necessarily matter. And I think the same thing will be true about this move into the agentic web as well. Like, in my mind, the 2010s were defined by the shift of web to mobile, and every, tech company, generally companies, we're pressured and forced to move over to this new form factor, or else risk being entirely left behind. And now with the 2020s, the story is mobile to agents. And it's interesting for 2 reasons. One is because it is an entirely new UX around how people are interacting and typing, but also it introduces a new actor, which is this agent that can do things autonomously without needing a human in the loop. So both of those things together make it a more important and more critical thing to get right and move fast on than the shift from web to mobile, but similar in terms of its like scope and the transition period.
Yeah, I like that. I like that answer. It is a little bit of a nuance. I guess the reason why I phrase it that way and bring it up is because there's almost this trap of like calling a marketplace, like traditional like eBay, Facebook marketplace, an agent. And I think those are building for 2 different goalposts, but at the same time, there is something there, right? Especially with what you said around like the skills, because skills are, they take time to make, and it's almost like trial and error. And someone else probably did the trial and error to build a deck in Figma using Claude Code, right? And you can just take someone else's skill, and we've seen these skill marketplaces, but people might have proprietary ones. They might have like very niche use cases that there needs to be some type of discovery system. So yeah, I think like x402 and machine payments is almost perfectly suited for that, as someone can kind of search and find, or their agent can search and find what they're looking for.
Yeah, totally. I agree. It's one of the big questions I have just broadly is around the commoditization of software. And, they're giving away these skills for free today. Is there actually a reason for them to gate them? Is that going to be human behavior that we see? Like, what is going to be the incentivization mechanism for that to take place? Which is why I think like the more efficient model routing and whatnot is one path for that to go. But I also could see a world where this thesis is completely proven to be false pretty quickly if we continue to see like this broad proliferation of skills. And like, if I have an endpoint that the core incentive of mine is to get more people to hit that. I should eventually just be able to provide that for free. Or, I mean, make it as easy as possible for anyone to hit that. I want the minimal amount of gates between a user interacting with my API and paying me for it. So yeah, I'll be really curious how that piece plays out specifically.
Yeah, I agree with you on the commoditization of software. And it's almost like especially if the services are very similar, maybe like search or something, like just hypothetically search, right? You can sometimes tell the difference between search providers. But if you're kind of hitting a endpoint and then you get a result, there is that piece where, okay, like the price across the board will just naturally have to come down, because it's similar to like the AI models, right? If the models are very similar in performance, then you kind of have this commoditization. I think there's ample debate, right, with Anthropic and OpenAI, but yeah, definitely a pace to track. On top of that, just to turn a little bit, do you think that these agent rails and tooling will continue to just improve on existing infrastructure? Or do you think that the whole system will kind of be rewritten specifically for agents? And the reason why I ask is we had some other teams like Agent Mail, who's literally running agents through the mailboxes with the like CLI. And that's definitely like, that's a human experience, right? But then we talked to some other teams where they're building towards, agent specific rails or like browser based, where they literally allow you to traverse a human like website. Curious for you, like, how do you kind of see that play out? Is it that everything is rewritten? Is it partial, or you think it's kind of like we just deploy the agents on existing infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm certainly not as well versed on this specific subject as possibly other guests, but my read on it is sort of the same. I would call back to the web to mobile to agent analogy, where nobody was rebuilding their entire stack to move to mobile. It was more so about the externalization and transformation of their web-based site to be something that works within the Apple App Store. I think we'll see the same thing, especially in the short to medium term, take place for agents, where the new version of building an app is just having APIs for everything and a CLI and an MCP, such that your agent can you can support agents as first-class customers, essentially. And that's what we're doing with Coinbase for Agents. The whole idea is to externalize Coinbase via APIs and MCPs and CLIs, such that it's trivial for agents to interact them in the identical way that a human would, but much more efficiently. And I think that's what we'll see across the stack from everyone as an initial starting point, because it's sufficient for the time being. Now, the one area where I think we could see some forced transformations need to occur is particularly around the scale required to support agents. If there really is, 10 agents for every one human, or they're just interacting at the speed of machines, at the speed of fiber optic cable, then I imagine that a lot of the existing solutions won't necessarily be ready for that. But that's something we can solve over the long term. And yeah, for the time being, I think it's mostly a matter of like making sure that agents have the tools and infrastructure in place to start to execute these things, which can be done via API, before figuring out how to optimize it specifically for that.
Yeah. And for you specifically too, and maybe by extension, Coinbase, like what are you building towards? What is kind of like this utopia, I guess, for lack of a better word, that you see playing out, where like the product thesis plays out? And yeah, what needs to happen? What does it look like? Or are people like transacting with each other? Are agents are doing what? Like what needs to actually happen for thesis and the product thesis to play out?
Yeah, so starting with the product thesis and sort of moving back toward the gaps that I think exist today and what needs to be done. Overall, I think that the sort of end ideal state is that agents are first-class citizens of the internet. They engage and interact in various different actions in a near autonomous manner. And if we think about the natural end game here, and my strongest conviction belief is that financial independence for agents is a precursor to full agent autonomy. What this really means to me is that if you give the agent the ability to pay for things online, much in the same way that you can increase the ability of a human to interact on the internet with money, for agents, it's even exponentially higher value, because they can interact with services. They can hire humans to do their tasks. Really, my radical take and loosely held opinion is that this is kind of how we see the resurgence of DAOs as truly autonomous organizations. The original vision was automation at the core and humans at the edges. And obviously the version we have of DAOs today is nothing like that. I think we'll look back and see that as the DAO for the sake of a DAO, in terms of providing some level of legal protection and cover, but it's really nothing like what this original vision was. And I think that's fully possible with agents, where you have some automated brain, adhering to a constitution that then can go hire an accountant to go file their taxes or get them an LLC. Hire somebody to do some tasks that may require a human in-person element. I think it'll really be the overthrowing of the internet from something that humans are interacting with to something that's like agent first and agent native. And as far as how we get there, it's really a two-sided marketplace problem of supply and demand. And right now, I think x402 has done an amazing job of catalyzing the supply side. We have various different integrations with AWS directly embedded inside their enterprise platform. Cloudflare is introducing this pay per crawl, such that agents can go pay for transactions on websites. All of the different members of the x402 Foundation are working something quite exciting. So all of the supply side and thought leadership and initiative is there. Where we're really seeing a lack of catalyzation at this very moment is on the actual demand side. Part of this is because the wallet infrastructure still isn't seamless. It's the chronic classic problem of crypto UX broadly. But the other part is that the UX problem of getting this into a chat interface and doing so seamlessly that the user doesn't even realize that they're paying with stablecoins still remains something that we need to do. So we're working on that, sign in with Coinbase for the Coinbase with Agents product, making it available in all the chat harnesses, whether that be Claude in the web or OpenClaw, whatever that might be, make it as trivial and seamless to really mitigate the need for a user to do anything to set up an agent besides give it money. That to me is the ultimate end game here for how this evolves.
Got it. Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's like, it's very great experience to use stuff in Claude Code and, Hermes or Codex, like whatever terminal you're using. And it's like the AI space in general, like the SF traditional AI startups are deploying tools into developer environments. And I would argue like people don't even know kind of what's going on with AI and workflows in general, just because of how heavy the technical lift is to like really use some of these tools with the CLIs and the MCPs, all these jargon words. So yeah, I think that we've seen some like early rumblings of this with like Visa and OpenAI. And I'm curious for you, is this like an agent that needs to be deployed and like, like a universal agent tool? Because there isn't really one that exists for kind of like the general public or like retail folks.
Yeah, I think that's part of the push that we're doing with Coinbase for agents. It's literally Coinbase, but for agents. Like the whole idea is to make it as simple as possible. We have a long way to go before we get there, don't get me wrong, but I think that probably is the biggest barrier. Another piece in my mind that's a pretty big gap is the enterprise adoption of agentic commerce. I think right now we've primarily seen it from the perspective of crypto-friendly people, solo entrepreneurs, smaller businesses, tech-forward entities and whatnot. But we've seen the foundational labs shift from a consumer-first strategy to enterprise-first. And it makes a ton of sense. The amount of times that I use AI in my productive, work-oriented day versus the amount of times I use it on my own at home is substantially higher. One, because I'm not the one paying for the credits, but also most people, when they work, they want to be as productive as possible. And that leisure time is meant for leisure, watching movies, reading books, doing something other than like maintaining productivity. So while I think x402 has a really strong foothold in this group, it is by no means sufficient for the future success of the protocol. And explaining the value prop of agentic commerce and agentic payments to enterprises and giving them the tools as well to be able to adopt it seamlessly without having to go through concerns around, how do I do tax reconciliation if a user is paying me with just a crypto wallet? How do I ensure that people have signed my terms and conditions? How do I know that I can trust the person who I'm either buying from or selling to? This type of thing is going to be a pretty critical piece going forward, and one that I think remains pretty untapped.
Nice. And from these enterprises, like what are the conversations like? And are any of them like come around to start using the product and implement it at like a corporate level? Or is it still primarily these like, more sophisticated, quick moving players?
Yeah, it's a lot of the quick moving players. There have been a handful who I'll just keep unnamed for the sake of simplicity, who we've talked to And it's primarily about them exposing their APIs through x402. And sometimes their finance team pushes back. They're like, hold on, what exactly are we doing here? How is this going to possibly work? Like I said, how do we do the taxes? How do we do the accounting on this? All of these questions that are entirely, greenfield things that we're figuring out as we go along here. These are the things that businesses have been talking about mostly. We have been able to convert on a lot of them. And I think having this whole verticalized stack, including Coinbase for Business as a way for them to easily accept these payments, has been quite compelling. And for other enterprises, are Coinbase payments acceptance APIs. It's sort of like a broader infrastructure offering that replaced Coinbase Commerce. This having native support for x402, meaning that you need to do one integration and now your set of products is available to both humans and agents alike. That in and of itself has been quite compelling. We've seen enterprises who need a stablecoin story and they need an AI story. And this is solving both of those problems for them in a pretty seamless way. So I'd say we're making good progress. The biggest enterprises are still interested in providing the rails on which others can build. And, we can go down this picks and shovels rabbit hole all day long, but we do absolutely at the end of the day need consumer or enterprise actual payment volume flowing through x402 for us to consider this a real success. But I'd say that where we are today is a pretty exciting spot from where we once were. For context, our Q4 2025 goal for x402 was 25,000 transactions. And at the end of Q4, we were hitting that every 5 minutes. So the success and excitement that has been surrounding it so far has been completely exceeding my expectations. So I hope that will continue to be the case. And even if it's not, I think we have enough momentum to really get along some real clear use cases and trial runs at these experiments and hypotheses that we have to inform whether or not we're on the right track or not and iterate and improve from there.
Yeah, on that, this space is hyper competitive. I think from the incumbent side, there's Visa, MasterCard. Again, Visa did some stuff with OpenAI last week to implement payments or purchasing for commerce. Shopify has launched their protocol. And then between these incumbents, and it's kind of funny to say incumbents because some of them are newer startups like Stripe, I guess within the last couple of years, but Stripe has all this distribution already. Coinbase has a large distribution. Visa has a large distribution. What is the mental model that you have between cards and stablecoins versus API payments? Because these are all different philosophies or ideologies of money. And I'm curious how you see how that either fits together or if even stablecoins are the better route for agentic commerce.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, first of all, broadly, everyone that you just mentioned is actually building on top of x402. So in terms of step number one being aligning the industry on a payment standard and allowing each actor in that industry to try to improve the developer experience for their specific stack, that is something I absolutely welcome because it means that as we start to converge more around agentic commerce, it'll be that much more seamless for all of us to be interacting and for this broad vision to occur. That being said, though, I do think that each of these pieces has a different role to play. I think right now, at the very least, given the limited ability for cards to be used for microtransactions, both because they do have a 35 to 50% minimum for a transaction, and also because they charge the interchange, 2 to 4% fee. They're not great for small microtransactions, but what they are great for is consumer protection on larger e-commerce oriented payments. So when I think of the traditional agentic commerce, ordering shoes, buying things online, I think that the card space is pretty well equipped to handle that today. When I think of stablecoins today, I think microtransactions, machine-to-machine commerce at the speed of fiber optic cable, these kind of more experimental, cutting-edge things. Obviously, Coinbase's belief is that stablecoins are the cheapest, fastest rails to make payments on, and ultimately the whole world will trend toward that. But in the meantime, if we can just get everyone to adopt x402 as step zero, that'd be a great start towards seeing our goal.
Yeah. And so what is the direct benefit of even other chains adopting x402? How does that support your guys' push? If I'm Solana or Arbitrum, these different platforms or chains really that have adopted the standard, how does that kind of ecosystem value flow back to you as a product person?
Yeah, so we obviously have Base and USDC, and those are the preferred settlement rails that Coinbase has aligned on that drive sequencer fees. That being said, though, we also have the discovery layer, the wallets, the facilitator, all of which support various different networks that have adopted x402. And it still remains the primary infrastructure on these networks because the benefits that it provides, know your transaction, compliance things that enterprises are particularly excited about, and the general scalability and durability that Coinbase's wallet infrastructure, the same wallets that power the retail exchange provide. These are benefits that are cross-network. So while we ultimately obviously would prefer these to settle on Base, more than happy to see this happen on other chains as well. I think Solana is a great example of a chain that recently got Google's Vertex team, which powers some of their APIs to adopt x402, and it's Solana exclusive. And I think that's great because we can still absolutely support that from the same infrastructure that's supporting these Base payments and create an interoperable ecosystem for these agentic payments to happen across chains, across use cases, across really whatever.
Yeah, that's really unique positioning. Even if they are doing payments on a different chain, you still have infrastructure such as the wallet and other services to facilitate those transactions, basically what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And like, there's an interesting question in my mind that is a very open question, which is which layer of the stack is ultimately going to accrue value? And I have no idea. It's always struck me as odd that chains are competing to be the cheapest, fastest thing while also having their primary revenue driver being transaction fees in the chain's native currency. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a chronic problem that everyone in the crypto space, at least to some sense, identifies. So will it be at that layer? I don't know. Will it be at the wallet layer where, yes, there are value-added services that you can add on top, but ultimately anyone create a private key. And that is part of the value prop there, as well as the sort of open, permissionless nature of finance. It's an interesting question, one that I don't have a clear answer to, which is why we're taking a verticalized, shots on goals, lead bullet type of strategy.
All right. You might have said this earlier on a little bit, but where is like the biggest gap? And basically like what is required to kind of hit these internal goals of, okay, this is successful, not as like milestone tractions, but like actual success. Because for some products, especially like in the crypto space, it only takes 10 clients, doing $1 billion of transactions, right? That's a different strategy than 1 million people doing $100, right? So yeah, like how does this kind of play out in terms of what success looks like and what's the strategy towards that?
Yeah, x402 has been viewed internally as a moonshot bet. And I tend to agree that that's the right framing in the sense that if it works in the way that it attempts to be and it becomes the internet native payment standard, we're going to see hundreds of billions of transactions flowing through this every single year, if not every single day. Who really knows how big this could get? The TAM on the size of this market is still completely unbounded. That being said, in the bear case, which is pretty much anything but that, it becomes hard to tell the story around microtransactions and agentic payments and all of this much more broadly. So in my mind, it's still so early that taking, objectives around driving transaction volume is a little bit short-sighted. And what we're instead focusing on is where are we finding initial traction? Where within this stack are we seeing PMF, whether that be for enrichment or trading or whatever that might be? What are the areas that people are coming back to? And then taking a step back further from that, why is that the thing that matters? Is it because it's frictionless? Is it because it enables access to tools that users wouldn't otherwise know how to find or interact with? Like, what is really causing it? And how can we really pull the lever to crank on that a little bit further?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a race and it's hard to kind of see. And I think that's the case for like all of these players, not just you guys, but the card issuers, the Stripes, the Solana, et cetera. And even the startups, right, that are building in this space and trying to, make product decisions while maintaining revenue and budgets and stuff like that, investment. So yeah, no, I appreciate the comments on here. And as we're wrapping up, we always ask at the end, where is the alpha and where are you seeing like, some values, some very interesting opportunities, even like a book. And we now have to bring this additional rule, which is like, okay, you can't say anything about Coinbase or something, right? It needs to be something that is personal or something like that. And I know you also used to trade like basketball cards and like rookie cards and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe there's some alpha there. You should grab some Jalen Brunson cards or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the interesting autograph alpha I think that's out there is, and I used to do this whenever I was growing up, is every year before somebody runs for office, runs for president, they're going to release a book. And that book, they want it to be the #1 New York Times bestseller. And how do they guarantee that happens? They sign thousands of copies and sell them at face value. So like in 2016, you could pick up like a Trump book and a Hillary book for $35, whichever one of those two candidates wins. And this is consistent across elections. It will go up by 5 to 10x in value once they're actually in office and completely offset the loss that you see from the other side. So that's one of the key pieces of alpha on the autograph game. I haven't gotten around to it for this 2028 election yet, but there's still time. I guarantee you that we'll see the same thing happen within the next 2 years for whoever's running. I know JD Vance just released a book. Actually, I don't think that's a coincidence at all. I think that's a very clear signal that that there's something going on there. So you got to be New York Times #1 bestseller, and you do that by just giving away stuff for free.
Yeah. Wow. I did not expect to hear that. That's some tangible, real executable alpha.
I feel kind of, I kind of wish I didn't give that one out, but whatever.
Yeah, we're at the end of the video, so hopefully the people who stuck on will hang on to that one. But,
yeah, exactly. It's a little thank you gift for them.
Yeah. But yeah, man, great to have you on, and thanks for kind of going through some of these questions. And I think the landscape is difficult to track, right? And there's all these players, and everyone is figuring out what PMF is, and there's stuff that works. There's stuff that hasn't worked and has kind of gone to the side, but there's kind of this huge, landscape that is developing, and tracking where the value is going is what our goal is, really. So yeah, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Sounds good, man. See ya.